祝所有的中国朋友们，
祝中国朋友们，
祝大家，
祝大家，
祝大家
国庆快乐，
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 国庆快乐。
My three words are impressive, steady, and innovative.
Peace, rapid, stable development.
Amazing, rapid, and life-broken.
Stunning, harmonious, sustainable.
Growth, prosperity, and innovation.
Rapid, broad, and hardworking.
Power, progress, and prosperity.
Strategy, development, openness.
Speed, scale, and scope.
Spectacular, inclusiveness, innovation.
Transform. Global leadership, development.
Changes, chances, and challenges.
Inclusive, massive, and modern.
We can see China's internationalization is taking place.
In few years, I believe it will be the first, not the second.
Chinese development has been without precedent in history.
The government has lifted such huge amounts of people out of poverty.
The range of economic options and choices that Chinese people have.
China is a global power.
China is much more significant in global politics and economics than 70 years ago.
I can see myself how China was becoming such important participant of the multilateral system.
China throughout 70 years went through incredible development.
The growth China has achieved is certainly unprecedented in the history of mankind.
I think China has been a very transformative society.
Well, the most impressive for me is the alleviation of poverty.
The reform and open policy has provided chances to people inside and outside China.
The most impressive changes in China for us is that it has built its infrastructure with great standard.
China's economy is mostly amazing in terms of its progress and development. The optimism that Chinese people, extrapolate, that reflects to the world. So China is now a more confident economy. We can see China's internationalization is taking place.
It's a peaceful country. I live here in all aspects, like daily life, or even if their relationships with other countries do not interfere. China was more like in agriculture field. Now China is the second largest in the world. In few years, I believe it will be the first, not the second.
Chinese development has been without precedent in history. From a rural, poor country, China has experienced a strong growth through manufacturing and has become today the second largest economy in the world, at the epicenter for new technologies and innovation. This development has been managed by at the same time safeguarding the social harmony and promote eradication of poverty.
The living standard of the Chinese people and the fact that the government has lifted such huge amounts of people out of poverty during these 70 years is maybe the most impressive aspect of the development. But there are also some other aspects like the opening up of China, not only for business from abroad. Now Chinese are traveling more, they are going abroad as students. China has now been entering into an age of high technology and innovation, bringing Chinese business to the next level, not only being a place where a lot of companies come to produce things, but now China has become an inventor itself.
That rapid development of the range of choices that Chinese people have goes right across from the things that are available for people to buy, through to the choices of study and career options that people have, through to the ability to be able to choose to travel overseas and the range of places that people have the ability to and the resources to travel to. All of those things were probably unimaginable to Chinese people even just 1 or 2 generations ago. And today they are a fact of life for many Chinese people. I think the second thing, which is also incredibly important, not just from a Chinese perspective but globally, has been the way that China has been able to lift 700 million people out of extreme poverty.
China had become one of the leading powers, guiding the way that the global community goals as the second largest economy, as the most populous country in the world. Now China is much more significant in global politics and economics than 70 years ago. The last 40 years, 41 years, since the beginning of reform and opening up policy, progress is one of the defining features of China's development. I recognized with my own eyes when I first came to Shanghai in 2008. Now Shanghai is much more developed. The change is drastic. You can feel when you live in China. China's development is good for Chinese people, of course, but also good for the world at large. During this rapid development of China, especially in the last 40 years, millions of Chinese people get rid of poverty. This is good for global prosperity. It had a positive impact on the United Nations development.
That is the most impressive process of taking people out from poverty in the history. In just a few decades, you hundreds and millions of people that have right now a better life. And the other is openness, because it relates how China see in the world, how China see the relationship with the other countries in the world. I worked for the Argentina in the WTO several years ago. Started to work in 2001 when China entered to the WTO. I can see myself how China was becoming such important participant of the multilateral system in a very constructive way.
A lot of countries are really impressed by what you have achieved in the recent years. It's not surprising, it's just evident now. China is a global power. This means it goes with a global responsibility. Whatever decision China takes, it will have a global impact. And I think this means it's now in the league of the most powerful nations on earth, which is, I think, the biggest development I can see for myself.
China throughout 70 years went through incredible development. Some parts of the story are not very good, but a huge, big part of the story is extremely important and extremely successful. He recognized the potential of Chinese people, and he basically just opened the door for Chinese businessmen and incredibly hardworking Chinese people to realize their dreams, their China dreams. And what happened in the next 40 years, us, the rest of the world, were watching with the open mouth.
The growth China has achieved is certainly unprecedented in the history of mankind. China's development is not focused on itself exclusively. China has a very particular understanding and vision of international relations, which is a very cooperative one. They want to engage in win-win cooperation. They do that with very tangible projects such as the One Belt, One Road, which also Greece has benefited from. The most obvious change is the impressive rise in life expectancy.
I think China has been a very transformative society. Back in the days in 1949, all these years, from mainly agricultural society, progressively to a big manufacturing country, the biggest in the world, and then now moving towards a digital age, moving towards high-tech research and development. So I think in the span of 70 years, China has transformed itself from a relatively poor country to now a modest progressive society. So that is one of the major achievements. China is the only country in the world in such a short span lifted up 700 million people out of poverty. I think that's something about the Chinese leadership in terms of the planning, the policy in place.
Well, the most impressive for me is the alleviation of poverty. That is very remarkable. There is another important change that I see in China, the combat against climate change and the way you are conducting the pollution, not only air pollution, but also water management, which means clean out the rivers, the lakes, the ocean. You can understand this effort in this context. And all of this is part of a larger effort that China is conducting now to comply with the 2030 Development Agenda of the United Nations that had set up 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
Development of China, especially since 1978, when the policy of reform and opening up started, has brought about big changes to the economic welfare of the people. It has also brought about a big change in the status of China in the world, having China assume greater roles in world affairs. The reform and open policy has provided chances to people inside and outside China. Looking outward, as China gains power and the commensurate status in the world, it also carries greater responsibility and obligations to further contribute to the solution of issues the global community commonly faces in pursuing peace and prosperity.
It has upheld its beliefs in its governance, ensured that the development is cross-cutting all over the country, and that it has continued to be innovative in all areas in modern technology, while preserving its traditional culture. The most impressive changes in China for us is that it has built its infrastructure with great standard. It has built its education system as well as social assistance system in order to ensure that the development is people-centric and that it uplifts living standards of all Chinese citizens.